Aita, drama, secrets, confessions. Welcome to Tale Trove Reddit.
I used to be the rural girl laughed at by the whole town. I used to be humiliated by my coworkers right in the middle of a party, forced to bow down and pick up the glass they deliberately spilled on me. I used to think I would live a miserable life forever. But in just one night, everything changed. The one who once cursed me had to bow their head and call me boss. The entire company, that once mocked me, now had to stand and applaud. And believe me, this twist was anything but accidental. If you want to know how I went from a despised girl to a boss overnight, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will keep you hooked from start to finish. I was born in a poor rural village, where the moment you step outside your gate, the whole neighborhood knew exactly what you were doing. There, girls weren't allowed to dream big. There, people told me I could only marry, have children, and spend my life bent over in the fields. But even as a child, I knew I was different. I didn't want to live like a factory chicken trapped in that tiny village coop. The day I decided to leave for the city, the whole neighborhood gathered. Just to laugh in my face. They said, "That girl is only going to end up washing dishes." Some even placed bets. "She'll come crawling back within 3 months, pregnant and penniless." What would you feel if even your own family and neighbors treated your failure as their entertainment? The city didn't welcome me. I was in shock the first time I stepped into an office. Shoes borrowed from my cousin, an old worn-out blouse, and a thick countryside accent. Every time I opened my mouth, the entire room burst out laughing, as if I were a clown on stage. My boss looked me up and down and sneered. "You think this girl can actually do the job? Can you imagine what it feels like to become a joke in the very place where you're trying to prove yourself?" But what hurt me most wasn't the ridicule. It was the scornful eyes of the other women, those who should have understood and empathized with me. They didn't just see me as some country bumpkin. They spread filthy rumors, accusing me of things I had never even imagined. Everywhere I went, I heard the whispers. "That's the girl." Have you ever been turned into the center of mockery, even before you had the chance to show who you really are? I used to think maybe they were right. Maybe I was born only to be trampled on. But no. I was wrong. And it was in those very days of humiliation that I found the fire to write the most spectacular twist of my life. That day, the company held a grand party. Everyone was dressed like movie stars, while I stood out awkwardly in an old dress I had borrowed from my roommate. I sat quietly in a corner, just wishing anyone would forget I even existed. But life is never that simple. A group of coworkers walked over, glasses of wine in their hands. They pretended to laugh and joke, then suddenly splashed a full glass of red wine all over me. The entire room burst into laughter. The music stopped, leaving only the whispers. "So rural, she doesn't belong here." Have you ever been turned into the punchline of an entire crowd laughing at your misery? I was trembling, but I didn't cry. In my head, a voice shouted, "If you cry, they win. If you bow your head, they'll trample you forever." And instead of running away, I quietly pulled out my phone. I hit record. Every look of disdain, every petty act of cruelty captured clearly, frame by frame. They had no idea I was holding the weapon that would change my entire life. One of them even sneered. "What can you do to us, you country girl? Tell me, what would you do if, in your most humiliating moment, you suddenly held the evidence that could destroy their entire careers?" I sat back down, wiped the wine off my dress, and gave them a smile that made them freeze. It wasn't the smile of a loser. It was the smile of someone who had just planted a ticking time bomb. And from that moment on, I swore no one would ever laugh at me again. People always thought I was just a stupid country girl. They had no idea that in the dark nights inside my tiny rented room, I was living a different life. By day I got yelled at, but by night, I became a warrior. I buried my face in an old cracked phone screen, pressing it so close my eye nearly touched the glass just to read the words. I studied every line of law on free websites. I dug into finance lectures that even my boss didn't fully understand. Sometimes I stayed up until dawn, my eyes bloodshot, but my heart burning. Have you ever quietly practiced a skill just waiting for the exact moment to unleash it? People saw me go to work in torn shoes and a faded blouse. But they had no idea my head was storing a whole bank of knowledge I built night after night. I didn't just learn how to withstand humiliation. I learned how to use the law itself to turn my bullies into prey. Once, I overheard a coworker snort. "What does that girl know about contracts or company shares?" I smiled. If they knew I'd read through dozens of books on management, market analysis, and stock investing, would they still dare to look down on me? The more isolated I was at the office, the harder I studied. Every insult I turned into fuel. Every humiliation I wrote down as a lesson in my notebook. Have you ever felt your chest ignite just because you wanted to prove to the whole world that you were not ordinary? They thought I was an easy country kid to pick on. But in truth, I was quietly training to become the worst nightmare of their lives. After that humiliating party, I was no longer the silent country girl. I stayed up the whole night, replaying the video I had recorded. Every second, every frame, exposed their cruelty. I knew this was the opportunity I had been waiting for my entire life. The next morning, I sent the video to a friend who worked in media. The news spread faster than wildfire. Within hours, the whole company was buzzing. Those who once clapped and laughed at me were now pale, staring at the ground. Have you ever seen the same person who once poured wine on you now trembling as they beg for mercy? But I didn't stop there. I quietly printed out every contract, every email violation I had secretly kept for months. I handed everything to HR and to the authorities. The company shook to its core. For the first time, those at the top realized a country girl could make an entire building tremble. Within days, the press began to pick up the story. They called me the silent whistleblower. And I stood in front of the mirror, staring at myself. No longer the despised girl, but the one holding the knife by its handle. Can you believe that a single act can make the whole world look at you differently? That was the moment I realized. I had flipped the game. From a disposable pawn, I had turned myself into the queen. And this match, I wasn't playing just to survive, but to win. If you want to know how I turned this counterattack into the launchpad that changed my entire destiny, then hit that subscribe button right now because what comes next will shock you even more. Everyone thought I was just a country girl who got lucky, who happened to stumble upon some evidence. What they didn't know was that this was only the first step in a plan I had been quietly crafting for a very long time. While the company was in chaos from the scandal, its stock price plummeted without breaks. The ones who once sat in high chairs scrambled to sell off their shares, desperate to salvage whatever assets they could. But while they panicked, I quietly bought in. Every meager paycheck, every bit of savings I had scraped together, I poured into it. Those nights I lived on instant noodles just to save money were all for this moment. Have you ever dared to bet everything on a single move? I remember that morning vividly, when my phone lit up with a notification. Transaction successful. I had officially become a small shareholder of the company. Just a tiny piece of the puzzle, but enough to shock them to the core. The country bumpkin they despised was now sitting shoulder to shoulder on the shareholder list. Can you believe it? The same person once dismissed as office trash, now walked into the shareholder meeting with the title of owner. Their faces in that moment. Priceless. One even stammered, "No way. No way." But it was all real. I didn't fight back with tears, I fought back with the law, with knowledge, and with money. That was the moment I realized I was no longer the victim. I had become the player. And those who once bullied me were now nothing more than pawns in my hands. And the most terrifying part, my plan wasn't finished yet. I still had one last move left. A move that could change the entire game. The day I stepped into that boardroom, the air was so thick it felt suffocating. The very faces that once mocked me now sat frozen, pretending to be busy flipping through papers. The door clicked shut, and every pair of eyes locked onto me. A country girl. Now sitting in the chair reserved for a shareholder. I didn't need to say much. I simply placed a thick folder on the table, months' worth of documented evidence of their violations. The sharp thud as it hit the table rang out like a gavel delivering judgment. Have you ever seen someone who once despised you now trembling, waiting for you to speak? My old boss, the same man who once poured wine over me, went pale. He stammered, You can't possibly." I smiled. A calm, razor-sharp smile that silenced him instantly. I didn't need to raise my voice. My silence alone was enough to remind them of exactly where I stood now. In that moment, the balance of power shifted completely. I, the one they had belittled, was now the one holding their fate in my hands. I still remember my heart pounding, not from fear, but from the sheer thrill of victory. Can you imagine the feeling of sitting at the table of power, while the people who once humiliated you bowed their heads to listen? They softened their tone, calling me titles they never once would have used before. Madam, Miss. It was almost laughable. I didn't need their flattery. All I needed was for them to remember who I once was and who I had become. In that moment, I knew I was no longer the passive one. I had officially become the one steering the game. And this game I intended to play it to the very end. I thought that once I had power, everything would finally settle down. But I was wrong. The very people who once bullied me weren't about to accept defeat so easily. They began striking back this time, more vicious and underhanded than ever. First came the rumors. They flooded social media with lies. That I had slept with the higher-ups to get shares, that I had cheated my way into this position. Every morning, I woke up to hundreds of hateful messages. Have you ever felt the entire world turn against you even when you've done nothing wrong? Then came the traps at work. Documents were swapped out, critical emails mysteriously deleted, partners suddenly backing out because someone whispered in their ear. I was nearly isolated all over again. But this time, I wasn't the naive country girl anymore. I knew how to strike back. I hired tech experts to trace every move. Every fake email, every anonymous account, I tracked them to the source. And there they were. My old colleagues, the same people who once humiliated me, hiding behind screens, launching cheap attacks. Isn't it ironic? The very bullies who mocked me to my face now had to cower in the shadows to take their shots. I didn't expose them right away. Instead, I kept gathering evidence piece by piece, bit by bit. I let them believe they were winning, that they were about to bring me down. All while the real trap was waiting for them. The pressure mounted with each passing day. But instead of fear, I felt stronger than ever. Because I knew when the bomb finally went off, it would be them buried in the ashes of the mess they created. That day finally came. After countless nights of patience, after sleepless hours collecting every shred of evidence, I had it all. And with just one click, the entire truth exploded into the light. The very people who once mocked me, who spread lies to drag my name through the dirt, now trembled as their own names flashed across leaked emails. The whole company went into chaos. Partners, clients, even the press stormed in with the same question. Why would you stoop so low? Can you picture the sight of those who once sat above me now shrinking, hiding their faces from the cameras? In a single night, the balance flipped. The company's stock plummeted, while I, the one holding both the financial plan and the damning evidence, was offered the interim leadership seat. From the girl no one respected, I became a true definition of a boss overnight. The same room where I once bowed my head now echoed with applause for me. The same people who said I wasn't good enough now had to submit every number for my approval. Sweeter than victory itself was the look in their eyes the moment they realized I would never again be that fragile girl they once humiliated. But I didn't take revenge by destroying them. I turned that shock into a lesson. Those who sow the wind will reap the storm. And I want you, the one watching this right now, to remember one thing. Success doesn't just come from effort. It comes from a patience to wait for the perfect moment to strike. So tell me, what would you do if your life flipped overnight like mine did? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next story will send chills down your spine. And remember this. Never underestimate a country girl. Because in just one night, she can turn the entire world into her stage. This isn't just my story. It's proof that sometimes, the weakest one is the one who lands the final blow. Now the real question is, will you dare to wait for your own overnight?